Welcome to Reddit Reads r/ProRevenge. Our first Reddit post is from Rygione. Got my freshman dorm leader fired a year after he called the cops on me. I've never really posted anything before, but I have a funny revenge karma story that my friends have always enjoyed. I first got to college my freshman year and met the dorm leader raw at most schools. Like most colleges, the dorm leader was the upperclassman that lived in the dorms and monitored the freshman halls. My dorm leader's name was Julio, fake named, and at first, he seemed like a nice dude that minded his own business. He talked about how he would stay out of everyone's business if we would stay out of his. Also, he tried to be the cool dorm leader and always mentioned to me about how he drank tons of alcohol his freshman year in the dorms. He gave off the impression he really didn't care if we ever drank in our dorm rooms, but to just keep it on the low if we did. I really didn't drink much at all, but I appreciated the fact he seemed pretty normal and didn't try to rat on kids. During the last week of October of my freshman year of college, I had one of the hardest weeks of my academic career. I was a biochemistry major taking some pretty tough classes and had 3 exams that week. At the end of the week, a friend I had recently made down the hall invited me to his dorm room to watch an upcoming NBA game. As we were watching the game, he had a bottle of vodka and gave some to the guys in the dorm. Being a naive and stupid freshman kid just trying to make some friends, I took 1 shot of vodka and continued to watch the game. As we are watching the game, one of the guys in the dorm spills a bottle of soda and rushes to the bathroom to grab some paper towels. As he walks out of the dorm room, Julio walked by and noticed the bottle of vodka. He laughed and said something of the sorts of "I remember when I was a freshman, just try and keep it down." We thanked him and told him to have a good night. It seemed like a normal conversation and nothing out of the ordinary. 30 minutes later, we hear a knock on the door, and 2 policemen showed up with breathalyzers. They told us they had received a complaint from Julio about underage drinking and a party being thrown in the dorm room. Remember, it was 3 guys watching a Lakers game on a Thursday night at 8. I ended up getting a minor in consumption charge for blowing up. 2. Had to do 20 hours community service, a reflection journal, and appear to the Judicial Affairs Center at my college about my supposed drinking problem. I'm not blaming the officer for giving me a ticket, but I was pretty upset that Julio, who always talked about getting shit-faced freshman year in the dorm, called the police right after he essentially gave us the okay for the night. A few weeks later, I see Julio and StraighTube asked him why he decided to rat me out. Specifically, I asked why he didn't just tell me to head back to my dorm if he had a problem with the alcohol instead of calling the police right after our conversation. He responds word for word with "You made a decision and had to suffer the consequences of that decision." After that incident, I never really talked to him, but he always tried to be buddy-buddy when he saw me in the hallway. Anyway, I eventually leave the dorms and move off campus for my sophomore year. I had decided to rush a fraternity my freshman year and ended up meeting some really nice guys. I have never been the fraternity type. During the 2nd semester of my sophomore year, my fraternity was taking a new pledge class. One day I received a text from Julio saying one of the guys pledging your fraternity has been caught dealing alcohol to another freshman in the dorms. I thought I would let you know. Turns out Julio was the dorm leader for a freshman pledging my fraternity and ratted him out to Judicial Affairs as well. Thinking the term dealing alcohol, about a week later, that kid pledging our fraternity came up to me asking about the message I received from Julio. Essentially, a pretty similar thing happened to him like what happened to me. Julio found out he had given another kid in the dorm a bottle of wine and reported it to the police. This kid ended up getting a minor in possession and had to speak with Judicial Affairs. This is where the story gets hilarious. In his meeting with Judicial Affairs, The kid pledging our fraternity told the judicial affairs guy that his dorm leader Julio was now a senior at this point had texted me about the charges pending against him. Apparently, it's a huge violation to discuss pending charges against a freshman in your dorm to a third party. The judicial affairs guy told him that if he could prove Julio was discussing this charge with a third-party Akami, he would receive severe sanctions. Basically, if I sent that text to the judicial affairs people, Julio would be in a shitload of trouble. So I sent the text that night to the judicial affairs people. After that, I didn't hear anything about what happened to Julio and had honestly forgotten about it. However, nearing the end of the school year in my sophomore year, I saw Julio at the dining hall and came up to speak to me. He tells me a story about how he knows I was the one that ragged him to judicial affairs, how he ended up getting fired from his dorm leader position. After going through his entire sob story, he asked me, "Why did you do that? This could have been handled completely differently. I didn't have to get fired and I could have kept my scholarship money." I look at him dead in the eye for what seemed like 30 seconds and say, "Julio, you made a decision and had to suffer the consequences of that decision. TLDR, my raw made it seem like it'd be ok to drink in the dorms, but then called the cops on us." I then used the same on Eleanor on him a year later when I got him fired for violating school policy. This comment is from Ispanilit. I can imagine what kind of guy Julio is. He's not really popular, so he's trying hard to look cool using his seniority and position. His stories about him drinking as a freshman was one of his ways to make him look cool. It could have been a true story, but it's just probably him drinking alone and no one knows. The fact that he ragged people for drinking and used the term dealing alcohol really shows that he's not a popular guy. Probably just a loser who wants to look cool in front of his underclassmen. This comment is from Rygione. Oh, everyone thought Julio sucked. He would make up these outrageous stories and try to pass them off as true. One time, he made up this wild story about how he was engaged in his senior year of high school and his fying cheated on him and got pregnant from another guy. Turns out he was openly gay in high school and went back in the closet when he went to college. Also, he always told this story about how he was once offered a full ride to Princeton, but turned it down. The other dorm leader in my hall was actually a pretty cool dude and basically let everyone know that Julio was a pathological liar. This comment is from Lord Byron. Colleges in America are really weird. This story makes a narrative sense, but none of the rules or social aspects are normal to me. Now, a word from today's sponsor. Make sure to donate to my Patreon down in the description below to get early access to videos, participate in special patron-only events, and other goodies. Any amount of money is greatly appreciated. It makes it easier for me to make the content that I love making, and I know you guys love too. Now back to the video. Our next Reddit post is from Rowan Winterless. Fire me, you're all losing your jobs. After uni late 2018, I fell on rough times and was forced to move back to my hometown. I tried to transfer my job to a branch in my area, but failed, thus I needed to get a new job. I settled for a 20-hour-a-week job at a Bookies, with a second bartending job in the evenings. The Bookies is the target for my revenge, which was entirely accidental. Involved are the following: Chanel, my manager's manager; Shay, my manager; Jorge and Gordon, my coworkers; and Kara, a coworker at another store who is relevant later. Names changed, ANDO are redacted. I ended up working behind the counter as a customer service manager, basically a step up from a cashier. It's fancy when seen on a CV, but there's nothing really to it. I took bets, chatted with customers, helped people with machines, and for the vast majority of my shift sat around waiting for something to do. I got on well with my coworkers, or so I thought, and had no major issues. It was 20 hours a week, about one more than minimum wage, with a lot of overtime required of me and irregular shift patterns. Though I had no issue with the job, beyond how difficult it was to juggle the schedules of both of my jobs. In February of 2019, after working for the company for 6 months, I was invited to a probation hearing. It cannot be emphasized enough that it was a probation hearing in which I would have my performance reviewed and, as informed in training, was entitled to a pay rise at the end of it. I arrived that morning to a disciplinary hearing where, without even a shred of evidence, I was accused of 11 different cash discrepancies dating back to early November of 2018, shortly after it started, which all amounted to $271.36, all but one of which I'd never heard of before. These had apparently been reported and logged by my manager Shay and my coworkers, despite no one saying a word to me at all. Not a whisper in the 5 months this had apparently been occurring. I was told that it was unacceptable. A call was made to HR and I was terminated on the spot and forced to hand over my keys and to never set foot in the store again. To my protests, I was told the decision could not be appealed and I would eventually receive written confirmation of my employment's termination in the post. I did let myself slump around and feel sorry for myself, so on the way home I opened up Indeed and applied for a bunch of jobs, and before I arrived home had an interview set up for the next week at what is my current place of work. Now, I was fuming at having gone, but somehow my parents were angrier and ordered me to let them know when they got into contact with me again. Almost 2 weeks later, I received an email from the company's HR which reiterated the accusations and stated again that I was terminated. My mom sat me down in her kitchen and walked me through a letter response that was 2 parts professional and 3 parts scathing, ripping into them about their unprofessional conduct, their ludicrous claims, their lack of evidence, the holes in their story because there were quite a few, and finally, the cherry on the cake, the employment laws they'd broken. Now, I didn't want much, just a nice reference. A promise that not a whisper of these accusations would turn up when my new job asked them for a reference because by then it'd already been offered the job. I then attached the letter to an email to fire back at their HR department. Then I added Janel's work email, then her boss's email, and finally the holding company that owned the brand. Cause I wanted to make sure this was seen. A bit of background. The Bookies I worked for is a brand that is owned by an international company. Their name behind the scenes is slapped on everything, and they pretty much dictate everything we did. I'm not sure if holding company is the correct term, but I'll stick to that for now. Anyway, I sent this email with a 48-hour window for a response. I received a reply the next day from the same email that my demands were being met. I smirked victoriously and moved on with my life. However, it set off a chain reaction that I won't know about until 3 months later. 3 months on, it settled into my new job, a call center position with double the hours and well over double the pay. It'd gone through training and was settling into my new position when I see a new set of trainees settling in near my team. Among them was Gordon, one of my coworkers from the Bookies. I was stunned. Gordon had been at the Bookies for 6 years when I joined. He was well liked, good at his job, and a favorite of the managers. There was no way he'd been fired, though I did really want to talk to him, as I was of the impression that he, Jorge, and my manager had likely set me up. I did want to know what happened. Luckily, on seeing me in the break room one shift, he sought me out and told me everything. Apparently my email had been read by the higher-ups in the holding company and had caused a lot of scrutiny to fall onto the Bookies in our town, of which there were 3 in our area that Janelle was responsible for, 2 in my town and a 3rd in a neighboring one. Someone in HR passed a message down to the area manager, Janel's boss, claiming they wanted things investigated and they wanted results yesterday, causing him to drop everything and descend on our little town with the panic and aggression of a man whose superiors were watching his every breath. He went to Janelle wanting to know why he had been made aware previously that I was apparently stealing money, why I had been given keys to the shop and shifts on my own when allegations of that nature were attributed to me, and why I had been put under investigation. Turns out Janelle had in fact put in my employee file I was under investigation but had never actually gone through with any of the official procedures for monitoring and investigating me. Shock horror. Thus, she had fired me for the accused crime without looking into it at all, falsely claiming otherwise. Thus, the area manager took the dates and amounts of the cash discrepancies, confirmed that they had been reported on those days without my knowledge in Shay's own logbook of the shop's cash, and sent that information onto our security team to investigate. Another little detail is that the CCTV for every shop in the brand is outsourced to a private security company who monitors each shop remotely and has access to all the cameras and video. As was procedure, they looked into the dates mentioned to see if it'd been doing anything untoward. I know I was, and nothing was ever said to me. But they did find something. Turns out money was going missing from the shop, but surprise, surprise, it wasn't me, but Jorge and Shay. They not only set me up for reasons I will never know, but were also falsifying numbers and cash checks on the system to hide it. One thing Shay was caught doing was deliberately shortchanging customers by taking portions of their winnings without them even knowing it. Bear in mind, a lot of our customers were elderly men and women. Gordon claims that he once opened the shop after I and Shay had closed the night before and noticed a cash difference, but had been told not to say anything to me as I was under investigation and it could compromise it. He did apologize and I let it go. Needless to say, Jorge and Shay were fired. But it doesn't end there. Our team was small. Including me, there were a total of 4 people working at the store. As they hadn't been able to hire anyone to replace me, Jorge and Shay's termination meant Gordon. Even if they'd been able to get other colleagues from the 2 other shops to help out, it wouldn't have been enough to keep the shop open and manage the amount of customers. So they closed the location down until they could get the staff to run it. It was at that point that Gordon handed in his resignation and applied for his job at my work, meaning they had no one. On top of that, Gordon's girlfriend worked in the same shop as Janelle, and she relayed that she was rarely at their store in the other town for the next few weeks before the area manager reported she was fired as well. No reason given to her. I was later, but somehow it doesn't end there. With the store I worked at closed, this one being on the high street, and where most people preferred to go, the only other location in town was the much smaller location in the suburbs, the one where Kara worked, alone. She suddenly received an influx of customers into her tiny store space, and absolutely no support. Thus, for her own mental health, having already been overworked and underpaid, running an entire store by herself, she quit, meaning that location had to be closed down too. All of this at the worst possible time, March, when the Cheltenham Festival was occurring, which is a huge money maker for the gambling industry, even in a small town like ours. An opportunity the 3 other bookies on the high street reaped the benefits of instead of my old place, as the former customers went to them instead. As it currently stands, just over a year later, both shops remain closed, and am currently entering a job in cybersecurity, the training for which I paid for with my current job. Thanks for firing me, Dumbuses, you did me a favor. TLDR, I was fired for false claims of theft. I complained to the higher-ups. The real culprits lost their jobs, every shop in town closed down, and they lost out on a bunch of money and customers. This massively blew up, thanks for the support and everything else. Gordon and I got in touch with our old area manager, and we were able to get a bit more information. The security team rifled through about 3 years' worth of footage after they found out about Jorge and Shay, and have estimated that in that period alone they both stole nearly $4,000. The parent company also got involved and searched through years' worth of their cash checks and till checks, and noted plenty of irregularities. The parent company pursued criminal charges and the two were arrested, but as far as our area manager knows, the case is still ongoing. He thinks it's because they are still looking into how much they actually stole, as they've both been there a while, Jorge about 8 years and Shay 10 years. I doubt they'll have security footage of all that time, but I bet they're trying to get a more accurate figure to really nail them. And in comes a new character, Tammy, obviously not her real name. She is an employee who was hired and fired shortly before I was at the same store. She lasted just past her probation before she was fired. Wait for it, for months' worth of cash differences and false till checks she wasn't made aware of prior. However, her situation is far worse than mine. Tammy is in the process of suing the company for wrongful termination alongside financial and emotional damages, as she was put under a lot of stress whilst in the job by Shay, who apparently left her to fend for herself and would refuse to step in when customers got aggressive, and then had a miscarriage shortly after her employment was terminated. Our area manager doesn't know anything more, as it's escalated and gone way above his head, and I doubt I'll be able to get any more information on it. But I doubt the company's doing too well on that front, and I wish her the best. Gordon and I are considering reaching out to some of the other fired employees, of which he can name a few, who were terminated for similar reasons, to get their side of things. But it seems very clear that what Shay and Jorge were doing was going on for a long time, and I was only the latest scapegoat. Chanel, unfortunately, is perfectly fine as far as I'm aware. Her husband and her opened a taxi company several years ago, and she seems to have just got more involved with that. I haven't seen her, so I wouldn't know. But she was terminated for gross misconduct and for not following procedure, which is kin to what I expected. And Kara, who our area manager actually really dislikes, but is lovely and did not deserve what she went through, is doing okay. I've messaged her, and she and her partner recently bought a house. She also got a job as an events manager at a local historical site. She's happier there, as she actually has people to talk to at work and isn't alone anymore. TLDR, Jorge and Shay are being prosecuted after stealing thousands. A former employee is suing after going through the same thing as me, but worse, Janelle is fine, and so is Kara. Thank you again for all the awards, updates, and support X. This comment is from Pen and Paper 30. Buy your mom some good tea for that. She's an avenging angel, and y'all sound like great people. This comment is from Rowan Winterless. I'm not sure, I've not looked to take it any further. And it's almost a year ago now, so I don't know if I could anyway. This comment is from Rowan Winterless. It's ridiculous if that's the case. What a petty amount to lose your job over, right? I do wonder if it was more than that, but for whatever reason, that was how much they didn't cover up. I'll never know. That was Reddit Reads r/ProRevenge. If you like this content, please subscribe and click the bell icon so you are notified of new uploads. We upload new videos every day. Also subscribe to our Patreon, as that will help us a lot. See you next time.